So when the children of Scotland aren't learning about gender being a spectrum, and climate change, and porn, and consent, and diversity, they're learning about the myths of immigration in order to promote equality and inclusion and so on and so forth. And I have to admit, coming across this was rather irritating, purely for the fact of what they're trying to imply. Meaning, for example, that alongside their anti-racist education, there's also a Holocaust education that coincides. And the implication is pretty obvious when you start to read through it, that they're implying that any anti-immigration rhetoric that people may hear today can be compared to that of the Nazis directing their hate speech, quote unquote, at Jews before the Holocaust began. They're teaching the children all about fascism and racism and so on and so forth, but they're going on to say here that the Holocaust was a genocide which took place during the Second World War, in which Nazi Germany, aided by collaborators, systematically murdered approximately 6 million Jews and persecuted and murdered other groups. It is the most extensively documented genocide in history, and it reveals the full range of human behaviour from appalling acts of hatred to remarkable acts of extraordinary courage. It raises profound questions about the human condition, making Holocaust education a rich seam of material for independent inquiry, with the examination of moral and human rights issues and the exploration of one of the central aspects for curriculum for excellence, what it means to be a responsible citizen. Crucially, Holocaust education and educating young people about other genocides enables learning about racism and fascism and the dangers that each pose to human society. It has the potential to empower young people to use their voice and have the courage to speak out about prejudice, hate and oppressive behaviour. By learning from the grave wrongs committed against humanity in the past, young people can be equipped to create a more cohesive society in the future. Silence helps the oppressors. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. So, the myths of immigration. Targeted specifically at primary 3 and above, from Scotland's largest and most effective education trade union. So the introduction says, the EIS welcomes and values a diverse and inclusive society, welcoming refugees and asylum seekers to Scotland, supporting a rights-based approach to migrants and refugees, and expects governments to uphold all relevant laws, including the 1951 Refugee Convention, rejecting the demonisation of refugees and asylum seekers whilst seeking to enhance the understanding of migration. Historically, immigrants have faced a number of challenges when settling into a new home. One of the most significant challenges faced by immigrants in Scotland is a lack of widespread public understanding about immigration, apparently. Misinformation about immigration has encouraged a rise in racist attacks and put additional barriers in the way of people abroad who are on the move. Historical context. Immigration to the UK and Scotland is not new, and the debate about levels of immigration is a recurring one. Britain once had an empire of colonised countries which contributed to the movement, not always freely, of people between countries. The British history is steeped in migration and immigration, but despite that, just after World War II, we were about 99% white. Now all of a sudden, within my lifetime, we'll be a minority. And it's nothing to do with racism, to point out the obvious. That ain't a myth. It's pretty simplistic mathematics. During the 19th and 20th centuries, linked to increasing industrialisation, the UK has experienced immigration from many countries, including the West Indies, Ireland, Pakistan, Italy, China, Poland, etc. Simultaneously to their arrival often has been scapegoating of immigrants, blaming them for societal problems such as shortages of jobs and housing caused by political decisions like pursuing austerity. Scapegoating of others can lead to multiple forms of oppression and ultimately to murder, with Jews being used as scapegoats by the Nazi government in Germany before and during World War II, and 6 million Jewish people died in the Holocaust as a result. Dehumanising people opens the gate to abuse. That is why it's so important to challenge the myths of immigration and the prejudices that can arise from misinformation. Wow. Myths of immigration, countering misinformation. We have loads of immigrants in the UK. Less than 1% of the world's refugees live in the UK, with refugees making up only 0.19% of the UK's populace. 86% of the world's refugees live in the poorest countries. There are more refugees in Turkey, Pakistan and Lebanon than anywhere else. That doesn't disprove the fact that there's immigrants in the United Kingdom. is a net gain of 300,000 every single year. 600,000 odd enter the country, about 300,000 leave. And of course, the non-European immigration en masse for years, which goes majorly underreported. Second myth. People come to the UK because we're a soft touch and give out benefits. People just want free healthcare, etc. Most immigrants are refugees, fleeing persecution, violence and war. Most immigrants are refugees. Since when were most immigrants refugees exactly? They cannot safely stay where they are. That's why they often find dangerous ways of leaving. Some people freely choose to leave a safe country to work or study in the UK, just as many UK citizens choose to live in Australia, America or Europe. Migration is part of the British history and culture. 1.2 million people born in the UK live in other EU countries. The UK is very tough on immigrants and has comparatively low levels of social security benefits and a high level of refusal of asylum applicants. This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable what I'm reading here. You know, again, they're trying to attribute every single person that decides to up sticks and leave from the Middle East and or Africa as a refugee, regardless of whether or not they've got proof of that claim. Let's not forget the refugee crisis saw a clear and utter exploitative move from Africans en masse, being picked up by NGOs repeatedly day after day. But of course, they're all refugees apparently, because all they need to say is that they're refugees. And it's taken as gospel, it's taken as fact. Immigrants are all the same. Immigrants aren't like me and my family. These are important legal differences between economic migrants, refugees and asylum seekers. Immigration has brought new and exciting cultures to Scotland. We are a mix of races and have benefited from that diversity. Is that so? Ultimately, all human beings have the same rights and needs. Tell that to the Christians in Islamic countries, eh? Immigration is the news every day, but there is a myth that it is taboo to discuss it. Media portrayals of immigration can create or exacerbate racism and prejudice and are very worthy of discussion and critical examination. Many immigrants are fleeing terrorism. Many immigrants have been victims of terrorism. Most terrorism is committed by people who are legally resident where they commit their crimes. Leaders from black and ethnic minority groups and faith and community groups condemn terrorism. Terrorism is a complex issue with complex causes. Stigmatising immigration is wrong. A significant minority holding negative attitudes towards diversity, with the Scottish Social Attitude Survey finding that a third of people in Scotland say that they would rather live in an area where most people are similar to you, and fewer than half agreed that people from outside Britain who come to live in Scotland make the country a better place. Well, on the flip side, I don't understand why they constantly proclaim that just because they come from elsewhere, it automatically makes the country better. That's a ridiculous claim. It's nothing other than pandering, rather insufferable. Nonetheless, it says that it considers that hate speech in some traditional UK media continues to be a serious problem. Low and declining numbers of ethnic minority teachers, that somehow indicates racism, suggesting that black and ethnic minority graduates experience barriers to entering the teaching profession, meaning that schools gain less social, cultural and linguistic capital than other more diverse workplaces, because diversity is a strength. No, it stands to reason that because they're a minority, they have to suffer the burdens that come with being a minority. The prominence of racist and extremist views in the political discourse have associated with the Trump administration and Brexit, highlighting the issue, saying there continues to be considerable intolerant political discourse, which is linked to an increase in xenophobic sentiments. Reports that Muslims are similarly portrayed in a negative light by certain politicians, and as a result of some government policies, and raises concerns about the tenure of discourse on traveller communities. The passing of counter-terrorism legislation, which the EIS views as likely to unfairly and disproportionately impact black and ethnic minority people. Scotland becoming a more diverse nation, and other areas of Scotland that have not previously hosted refugee communities doing so for the first time, often with positive results, but with some tensions also. Included microaggressions. Subtle experiences of racism that happen on a daily basis in public spaces, and misrecognition as Muslim based on ethnicity. Many young people in the study were highly positive about diversity in Scotland and valued schools as a safe place to study and develop friendships. And they also described in different ways how they were made to feel as though they did not belong on the basis of accent, colour, faith, dress, nationality and ethnicity. What's going on? So, the curricular approaches will include English, where pupils will study blood brothers and in connection have studied the place of Liverpool in the slave trade, the Robert Burns poem The Slave Lament, racism in football, the Diary of Anne Frank, exploring racism and anti-Semitism, Rosa Parks, Barack Obama, JFK and Will Smith to bring about some understanding of the civil rights movement and current racial tensions in the USA derived mainly from lefties. Divided City by Teresa Breslin, exploring sectarianism and racism. The issues shown in Hidden Figures, a film about the role of black women in the space industry. The coverage of Charlottesville in terms of bias. What the fuck, come on. Oh, dear me. Religious and moral education will include anti-Semitism linking to World War II, attitudes towards racism globally and locally, anti-racist role models, issues arising from the Holocaust, Interfaith Week. In social subjects, they will learn about Mandela. Through interdisciplinary learning, pupils learn about attitudes towards racism globally and locally. Pupils have engaged in a unit for secondary 1, 2 and 3 year groups on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which also includes anti-racism rhetoric. Yeah, of course it does. What a shock. Some classes will discuss the need to respect others, with secondary 3 class exploring what they may or may not consider as racist. Other approaches will see some schools hold special events, yada yada.